The new Razer Blade 14 is the most powerful 14-inch gaming laptop. Sorry, Asus Zephyrus G14. But there are some compromises in order to get these powerful specs in a smaller machine that you need to know about. I've got the highest spec configuration here with 8-core Ryzen 9 5900HX processor, NVIDIA RTX 3080 graphics, 16 gigs of memory, and a 1440p 165Hz screen, so some pretty crazy specs for a 14-inch laptop. There are also lower spec 3060 and 3070 options for less money though, and you can check out updated prices with those links below. Now, as a 14-inch gaming laptop, it's obviously on the smaller side compared to most others out there, but usually smaller and thinner means less performance, so is that the case here? Surprisingly, not really. I don't feel like the Blade 14 is being held back too much for its size. I mean, yeah, there are 15-inch gaming laptops with similar specs that can do better in games for less money, but it's still able to beat the 15-inch Razer Blade Advanced with 2080 Super from last gen, which isn't bad at all. And ultimately with a machine like this, it's pretty expected that you're going to be paying more to get higher end specs in a smaller footprint. That's just the way tech works. CPU performance is also up there. Again, yeah, there are other 5900HX laptops that are bigger that do better, but again, this level of performance in a 14-inch wasn't a thing not too long ago. The screen in the Blade 14 is quite good. It's got good color gamut, decent contrast, FreeSync premium, it gets relatively bright, and the response time isn't terrible. It's got an 8.75 millisecond average gray-to-gray response time, which isn't as good as say 15 or 17-inch gaming laptops, but it's the best I've ever recorded so far for any 13 or 14-inch gaming laptop. It's slightly ahead of the Zephyrus G14 from this year, while both of them significantly beat the 20 milliseconds of the Zephyrus G14 last year. Now, the Razer Blade 14 with RTX 2060 comes with a 1080p 144Hz screen, while the higher end ones like I've got here have that 1440p 165Hz panel. Now, Razer says that their 1080p screen has a 20 millisecond response time, so that's probably going to be a bit hard to recommend as it's probably going to be quite noticeably blurry, at least based on my personal experience with other slower laptops that have screens similar. So basically, if you're getting the Blade 14, it's probably worth paying more to get the 3070 model just to get the better 165Hz screen, as it drops the response time in half. Like others from Razer, the build quality feels exceptional. It's solid CNC aluminum with a black anodized finish. It both looks and feels great. There's not a heap of ports as it is on the smaller side, but there's reasonable connectivity with Type-C charging. And you can also connect an external monitor to any of the Type-C ports or HDMI to boost performance in games, as this bypasses Optimus and connects directly to the NVIDIA discrete graphics. Just as a brief example, here's the performance difference we're looking at in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, both with the laptop alone and then with the laptop plus external screen. So it's a relatively easy way to get an extra boost out of the laptop. Inside, the RAM is soldered to the motherboard, which is kind of expected for a laptop in this size, but unfortunately it only goes up to 16 gigs. There's no 32 gig option. There's just one M.2 slot, so storage upgrades mean cloning or reinstalling Windows. But the vapor chamber cooler up the back does at least keep it relatively cool given the high-end specs. Battery life is alright given the size. There's only so much room for battery, and it was possible to boost the battery life by more than 40 minutes simply by lowering the refresh rate down to 60 Hz. Now, the Razer software does give us the option to change the refresh rate between 165 and 65 Hz very easily, and the Razer software also has plenty of options for what to do for lighting and performance modes when plugged in or on battery, but for some reason that's just not seen in the screen refresh rate options. I think this would have been a perfect opportunity for them to give us the option to automatically swap to 60 Hz when you unplug the power. A lot of Asus laptops do this, and I have seen it improve battery life by up to 2 hours. And as we've seen in the Blade 14, it did improve it by 40 minutes. And let's face it, chances are if you're running on battery power, you probably don't need the screen running at 165 Hz, unless you're playing esports titles on battery or something. But even if that's the case, then you could just change the options in the software. I don't know, I just think they should give us the option. User choice is always best. There does seem to be some sort of bug here though. Anytime I change the resolution in Windows, the refresh rate would automatically swap back to 60 Hz, something that doesn't happen on other laptops. So if you change the resolution down to 1080p or something to get better performance in gaming, just be aware that the refresh rate has probably dropped down to 60 Hz. You'll have to change it back manually. The glass precision touchpad is excellent. It's fairly large given the size of the laptop. The keyboard is okay, but I thought the key presses felt a bit shallow, which is just generally the way with smaller laptops. There's less room. But it could also just be that I've tested a lot of mechanical keyboard laptops lately, so maybe I'm just spoiled. The front-facing speakers on either side of the keyboard sound pretty good. Nothing amazing, but there is a little bass and they get fairly loud. All things considered, I think Razer's Blade 14 is very impressive. It's definitely not cheap, but this shows us what a 14-inch gaming laptop is capable of now. The prices started around $1,800 for that 3060 model, but as mentioned, it's harder to recommend with a slower 20 millisecond response time screen, while the 3080 max spec model I've tested here is $2,800 US. Again, definitely not cheap, but that's always the case when you're paying a premium for higher specs with portability. If you want way more details on the Blade 14, then come and check out the full review over on my main channel over here, as I go into way more details. And if you're new to the channel, come and get subscribed to both of my laptop channels over here. I'll be comparing the Blade 14 against the Asus Zephyrus G14 very soon.